Hello and welcome to the NESN Soccer Show. I'm Mark, you're Marcus, and we're talking USA Soccer, our favorite topic on the NESN Soccer Show. At least the most talked about.
Your favorite topic.
I believe that we will talk about USA Soccer. So the World Cup qualifiers, the final qualifiers of the Hex are here. It'll be Friday, October 6th, and Tuesday, the 10th, 11th? Whichever day it is.
Something like that.
Something
Tuesday.
Like that. And Tuesday. So USA currently stands in 4th place in the CONCACAF Hex standings, tied on points with Honduras, but they lead Honduras by 8 goals in goal differential. And then they're 1 point shy of Panama at 10, Costa Rica at 15, and Mexico has already clinched their qualification at 18 points. Costa Rica has clinched at least a playoff bid to face the to go into the World Cup playoff.
Yeah. Costa Rica's in.
Yeah, they're in. They're pretty clear.
Yeah.
So this is a situation that I think USA did not expect to be in, but they are in it. And they are certainly capable of getting themselves out of it and doing just fine. But just very quickly, for the fans out there, to talk about qualification scenarios, if the U.S. wins both their matches versus Panama and Trinidad and Tobago, they are in through no playoff.
That's my vuvuzela. Yeah, they're in.
Obviously, if they were to lose either of these matches, they are scoreboard watching. If they beat Panama, Panama is sort of the most important game just because they're so close in points.
Yeah.
If they beat Panama, they're in a very good spot, and then maybe even a draw against Trinidad and Tobago will make it okay. But also, Trinidad has nothing to play for. They have been eliminated.
Yeah.
So you would expect that even though that's on the road, you might be able to win that match. But basically, if we don't win both matches, we're scoreboard watching, and it depends on how the other matches go on Friday, and then when you lead into Tuesday, where all the matches will begin at the same time, and could be an exciting final day of CONCACAF World Cup qualifying. There are so many different scenarios. I mean, I said I was going to go through all the different scenarios, and then
I think you hit most of them.
Yeah, I was like looking through, and I was like, there are too many to actually go through every single one.
Yeah.
So
what's most important?
Yeah.
This is the most important week in United States for the United States men's soccer team in 30 years.
Yeah.
Period. Because if they win both games, or I think 4 points should be enough to get in.
Yeah.
Win and draw, it is business as usual. We go to the World Cup for the, let's say, 7th consecutive time, or maybe 8th. One of the only countries in the world that has been to every World Cup since 1990. And, continue the slow growth of the game in this country. If they do not qualify for the World Cup.
Detrimental. Well, I'll tell you who won't be happy about it. Fox Sports. Because they paid a lot of money and they are kind of banking on the US.
One of their executives called it would be $200 million down the drain.
Right.
I guess we would have to do another show on what it would mean for the U.S. not to qualify for the World Cup, and it was just in the last 10 seconds that it hit me of what it might mean. Things would hit the fan if the United States didn't qualify. So after 8 games in this hexagonal competition, this is where it stands. It could go either way, or we could go to a playoff next month in November, and that'll be just another 30-plus days of hand-wringing and gnashing of teeth.
So just one last refresher on the Hex and CONCACAF, the final round of their World Cup qualifying. 6 teams, 6 countries. The top 3 advance. The 4th goes to the World Cup qualifier playoff, which right now will be the winner of Syria versus Australia, and they played the first leg of their 2-legged playoff, and they tied 1-1. So, we'll have a better idea of who that playoff will be after Tuesday.
Yep.
But that's sort of the scenario. You would have a home and away versus either Syria or Australia, and frankly, that's not. It's kind of dangerous, and it's different, and the players won't be used to the scenario, and it just won't be a good situation to be in.
Yeah.
We want to avoid that.
It would be a different kind of pressure than what they've had to face all year on.
Right. But a lot of news was made of the USA roster that was picked for these final two qualifiers. I think right off the bat, and what everybody's been talking about and writing about, is Fabian Johnson is not on the roster. There have been a few different things, and Fabian Johnson has said things in the past about wanting to play the important games, and then there's, he can only play left mid, or he only wants to play left mid when he has played in left back before,
right.
And done pretty well,
and right back, and he's done well there.
So, and you can look at it a million different ways about why Bruce Arena maybe left him off the roster. He did have an injury recently. There are a lot of different scenarios, but I think at the end of the day, he's more talented than many players that are on the roster. So why do you think this roster decision was made?
First and foremost, Fabian Johnson has not been playing much this season for Borussia Mönchengladbach in the Bundesliga. I think he's only played 180 minutes or something like that due to injury.
Yeah.
His season really hasn't gotten going yet. So as talented as he is and as important as he has been to the United States in the past, can you depend on a player who is not sharp? And especially when it comes to traveling all the way from Germany to Florida and then Florida to Trinidad.
Yeah.
He's not fit and firing. That's the first reason. The second reason, which is a little bit more intriguing, is that USA has a serious need at left back.
Yes.
DeMarcus Beasley, Jorge Villafana haven't gotten the job done there, or haven't solidified themselves.
It's been the biggest question through qualifying.
Right.
Yeah.
So if Fabian Johnson wants to be a team guy, he would say, well, maybe I'll just play there as I did in the last World Cup very well.
Yeah.
Even though it's not what he wants, it's kind of what the team needs.
Yeah.
He's been playing in wide roles, left-sided midfield role, for most of the biggest games this season for the this year for the United States, and hasn't done that well. Yeah, he hasn't done that well, and the team results are probably worse than his performances. So, maybe it's a addition by subtraction. That could be the idea.
How much do you think this is just Bruce Arena deciding, we're not going to bring him in, or do you think there was a conversation with Fabian Johnson and the men's national team coaching staff and Bruce Arena, and they said, listen, if we bring you in, we want you to be playing left back, and Fabian Johnson said no. Do you think that anything close to that conversation took place?
No, not in this instance. I don't know. If it had happened, it hasn't been reported, but I don't think so, because that's something that could have been had. That's a conversation that could have been had in September, could have been had in June, could have been had in March.
Right.
There have been plenty of opportunities to have that conversation and ensuing fallout. But I do wonder, knowing where the U.S. stands at left back, and Fabian Johnson, that's his position. The left midfield is his position at club level, but he spent the first 5 or 6 years of his career playing as a fullback, and he broke into the national team as a fullback. He can do it.
Yeah.
I have a feeling he just doesn't want to. Now, I don't know if Bruce Arena has asked him to, for the sake of the team. I don't think Fabian Johnson wants to go to the World Cup and play fullback. So
it seems pretty silly to me, but it does. It's hard to point at what else the reason may be, because the thing is, for anybody thinking, okay, well, who's playing left mid? It's Darlington Nagbe, and I think it's pretty generally accepted that he is better at left mid than Fabian Johnson, and the better pick.
He's done better in 2017 at that position,
so it's kind of, maybe he's just sort of has lost that competition, and instead of, it's kind of like the more you can do on any team in any sport, if you can play, a few different positions on the field, that should be something that I would think any athlete would take pride in and be excited about being able to do that.
Yeah.
And maybe it just, because it seems like if he did want to and he did commit to it, then he would be on the roster. You know what I mean?
I think the I think his injury history, recent history,
Yeah.
and lack of form and lack of playing
Yeah, it's a
time
lot
this
of different
season.
factors.
These are key games. There's no time to. There's no other time to recover or say, okay, we'll get it right next time. There is no next time. These
Yeah.
2 October qualifiers, that's it.
Yeah.
Unless the playoffs come around. But there's no more time for experimentation or gambling or
Yeah.
it's now or never.
Well, so we talked about the hole at left back.
Yeah.
And we'll get to our starting 11. But at right back, we have a positive addition. DeAndre Yedlin seems to be back and healthy, playing for Newcastle, playing well. We all know that he's a really great player when he's at the top of his game. And it just is sort of coming at a perfect time that he seems healthy, seems very ready to go for these last 2 qualifiers. So it's sort of, whereas the back line has been just full 4 question marks, for some qualifying games, at least at right back, we know we've got a solid player that we think is going to do a very good job. Anything else that you're excited about with DeAndre Yedlin just sort of being back in the roster?
I'm excited that DeAndre Yedlin is back in the roster. And a year ago, I probably wouldn't be saying that, but he, if he's sharp enough to play for Newcastle against Liverpool, he had battled injuries in the preseason and missed maybe the first couple games of the Premier League season. But the fact that he came right back into the starting lineup really says something about where he is right now. So for a player to play at, in a game of that magnitude, there were 50,000 screaming Newcastle fans. For him to just come right back into the team and play, not just against a middling team in the Premier League, but a big team, I think he's ready and he's going to be really fired up, and I think he's going to improve the U.S. back line. The best United States back line has played in recent years, and I would say that was in Copa America, absent the games against Argentina and Colombia. The best they've looked is when they've been when Yedlin is back there. So I think right now he's the number 1 right back. Graham Susie didn't really get the job done in recent qualifiers. So I think defensively they'll be a little bit more solid.
Yeah. So last 2 guys on the roster that we wanted to talk about before we move on to our starting 11 for the qualifiers is Benny Feilhaber and Chris Wondolowski on the roster. We've seen these names, but we talk about how important these matches are, and we talk about Fabian Johnson being left off the roster. Was it surprising, or why maybe was it surprising that these names popped up again on the team?
I'm never surprised to see Chris Wondolowski on the U.S. roster. I'm surprised when he plays, but I'm never surprised to see him there. He's a guy that represents everything that Major League Soccer, the marriage between Major League Soccer and U.S. soccer stands for, which is if you play well in this league, you should get a shot with the national team. It's a platform and a stepping stone. And over the last 4 years, there's probably not a single player who's used that platform better than Chris Wondolowski. And that's just as a matter of consistency, both when he plays and in training behind the scenes. Some guys are just good in the locker room. They're good to have around. Wondolowski will know that he's not going to be in the starting 11, barring some sort of calamity or catastrophe, and he'll be content with that role. He'll be ready to play if needed, but he won't make waves behind the scenes, and he won't ruffle feathers. Feilhaber, I think, gives a little bit, maybe a different dimension in the midfield, a little added creativity. He doesn't have his assist totals in MLS this season aren't as impressive as they are in years past, but he still has that part of his game, and it's still something that in the United States in the midfield is still lacking. Somebody who can create, unlock defenses, and even just orchestrate things a little higher up the field. But I wouldn't expect to see him starting either. But he's somebody who you can bring on in the 60th minute.
Sub guy if you want to change up how the game's going.
Right.
Well, back to Wondolowski, I think as we get to like these final qualifiers, we get more and more of, say, the removed USA Soccer fan or casual USA Soccer fan that maybe is only interested in the quote-unquote big games. And they might remember Wondolowski as the guy who missed a goal opportunity in the World Cup. But like you said, he really is so much more than that.
Yeah.
And he's a dependable player, and Bruce Arena knows exactly what he has in Chris Wondolowski. And if it comes to the point where we're down to, I guess, our last forward on the roster, that we know the adjustments we have to make in the rest of the field with the other players to adjust to having Wondolowski up top as opposed to Clint Dempsey or Altidore if they were to go down with injury or something like you said. So I think that's also it. He's just that solid veteran guy that you need on a roster that is dependable.
Right, because there aren't 23-year-old strikers who are, knocking at the door and pushing him out. And that's really, it's kind of an indictment on the player pool now, is that nobody has come in and knocked 30, I don't know how old Wondolowski is, 33, 34-year-old Chris Wondolowski off this roster for the biggest games you can have
that is a
in a non-World Cup year.
But you're right.
It's, that can be a whole separate show, but they have there aren't that many forwards knocking at the door saying, hey, I should be in here, and not Wondolowski. And Wondolowski's still playing well, as he has for the last 10 years. I know he had that miss against Belgium, but the rest of the time he's done
pretty well.
Yeah, he's done everything his coaches asked him to do.
Okay, well that brings us to the Marc and Marcus starting 11. Which, all right, so I have put down a starting 11.
All right.
You can see a lot of scribbles on this piece of paper I have at the desk.
And a rip. I see you.
Yeah. It looks like I was really diving over this, but you haven't seen this roster yet. You're going to react off the cusp. Just for the listeners, and I'll put it up for anybody watching the video, it's just a 4-4-2. We got Tim Howard in goal. Left to right on defense, DeMarcus Beasley, Jeff Cameron, Omar Gonzalez, and DeAndre Yedlin. Left mid is Darlington Nagbe. Right mid is Paul Arriola, who I think will surprise a lot of people. And I'll get to why I picked him. Then in a defensive midfield position, we have Michael Bradley. Forward midfield position, Christian Pulisic. And then up top is Josie Altidore and Bobby Wood. And then I also wrote Clint Dempsey will make an appearance probably in the second half with in the 60th minute or so as the sort of super sub. So I ran through that very quickly. What are your first reactions off the cusp?
My first reaction is that this is going to be a pretty boring segment because it looks a lot like the lineup I will propose shortly. It's about as strong as it can get. This is no nonsense, no messing around. Everybody's in their right place, it looks like.
Well, you said you were surprised by Paul Arriola.
Paul Arriola, it was he was the one that I didn't expect to have him. I wouldn't have expected it. He's not in my starting 11.
Well, okay, so I picked him, and you know what? Now that I was back and forth on writing his name down, but
there's nothing scribbled.
Every time, once I put it down, I was defiant. It wasn't a scribble out.
All right,
but every time I see Paul Arriola enter a USA match, it just seems like he is bringing more energy than any other player. And it's not just energy that's chaos. It's winning balls and then being under control and playing and making good decisions. And he's not any sort of, explosive type of player. He's not like Darlington Nagbe or Christian Pulisic where he can take on 5 guys, or not that they can do that either, but he's not going to make those kind of plays. But I think he brings sort of this consistent, hustler grinder mentality where on the right wing or on a midfield wing in a CONCACAF World Cup qualifier, it's hard to get a better player. And there also wasn't anybody on the roster that I felt like I had to have in there that was going to bring something that maybe outweighed having a guy like Paul Arriola who's just going to be going 150% for 90 minutes or for however long you have him out there. And then, as we talked about earlier, not to keep going, but if we were to bring on Benny Feilhaber, I feel like maybe Paul Arriola is the guy he comes on for. Or it could even go vice versa. But I don't know. So that was my thinking with Arriola. I think he sort of earned it, as just every time he seems to get better and better, and he's come into MLS and performed well. So it just, yeah.
I like that lineup.
All right.
Yeah, you know,
I didn't think you were going to.
I thought we, you know, the plan was that we would disagree over over spots. I don't have a lot to disagree with here. I think I would start Clint Dempsey against Panama, because in the event that the United States is either chasing the game or they're frustrated and things aren't clicking, Dempsey might not be the best guy to come in and change the game. For me, he's somebody that can come in, start the game, and have a real impact over the first 60 to 70 minutes before he starts to tail off, and that's even if he starts to tail off.
Right.
I would have Dempsey in the starting lineup, and I would drop Arriola. Going 4-3-3.
Okay.
Bradley at the base.
Yeah.
Nagbe and Pulisic
on the wings,
tucked in inside.
Yeah.
Altidore and Wood playing up high. Clint Dempsey a little bit, you know, a little bit lower than them. Maybe at as a false 9, not so much number 10. But that would require Christian Pulisic and Darlington Nagbe to do a lot of what they're not as good at, which is tracking back, winning balls in the midfield, and really just protecting Michael Bradley. I still think Michael Bradley should be at the base of the midfield, dictating tempo, but with another option up top. I would have Arriola, good guy to come off the bench, bring you energy, add width, but I like Dempsey in the starting lineup because the game is just this big.
Right.
And I'm thinking specifically the Panama game.
I was going to say we could sort of go into the Panama game as we talk about this. I don't disagree with your lineup at all, really. I was going to say about
I'm going gung ho, guns blazing. We're trying to score 8 against Panama.
Yeah, because the other thing with Panama is that they're 1 point up on the U.S. and they're on the road. They will be more than content to get out of here with a draw.
Yeah.
And that makes you think that they might sit back.
They will frustrate. They will foul.
Yeah.
And when a team is playing like that, I think it's better to have more players in the attacking areas.
Attack forward. And maybe the Pulisic and Nagbe needing to drop back and defend. Yeah. While it's obviously always and still important, maybe not quite as vital as some other matches it may be. And they may be on the attack more often than not.
Right. And the Bradley and then the back four, they can defend. When Panama's counterattacking with 1 player, 2 player, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys back there. So unless Panama really opens up and attacks with 6 or 7, I think Bradley, Pulisic, and Nagbe can do the job in the middle.
Right.
Probably won't be their best game, but having those 3 goal scorers up top, and they're warriors too.
Right. That just got me really excited for the match tonight, or on Friday night. Mainly because you like my lineup. I was expecting you to just tear it apart.
No, you did your research.
I think, I was agonizing over this last night. But okay, so USA versus Panama is in Orlando at Orlando City Stadium. This is the first non-friendly U.S. men's national team match in Orlando ever. USA last played Panama in qualifying. They played a 1-1 draw in Panama in March.
Yep. They also played in the Gold Cup, but that was a different U.S. team.
So just very quickly, this is very exciting for Orlando to be getting this game.
Yeah.
And it was only announced like a month ago, or maybe a little bit longer, that it would be in Orlando. So just maybe speak a little bit to how much it means for Orlando as just getting an MLS team, now getting this gigantic qualifier, as we said, the biggest USA match in 30 years.
In the last 5 years, Orlando has gone from Disney World to arguably, and I know Atlanta will, they will protest vehemently, the soccer capital of the South. It's happened. I didn't see it coming, but that city has taken to this team, Orlando City, taken to the Orlando Pride, the NWSL, taken to the U.S. national team in ways that I didn't see it coming. Couldn't expect it.
Right.
But it's really impressive. You know, they sell out every game. Their fans are passionate, right on top of the field, and I think it's both a reward and it's also U.S. soccer is saying, okay, where can we find the most supportive and intimidating crowd?
Right.
Like, where in the country do we go?
Orlando.
Yeah.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought?
Well,
yeah.
it's not that surprising to me that when you think about the state of Florida, it's one of the best soccer playing states in the United States. They train all year round. The men's national team has trained at IMG Academy a great deal in the past, and they are constantly churning out. I think on the U17 team, there's maybe a half a dozen of the players are from Florida. So it's just a lot of soccer being played in the state. And when you look at all the colleges that are there, and they only recently are getting MLS teams and professional teams, but all the colleges and all the high schools, those soccer games are very well attended, and there's passionate crowds at all of them. Almost when you think, almost like a high school football atmosphere when you think about it. And I grew up in Florida and went to high school in Florida, so that's how I can kind of speak to it, I guess. But it's not surprising to see an MLS team get so much support because I think it's a sport that almost everybody in the state can connect with.
It's part of the culture. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's. I have a feeling that had they put the game somewhere else or tried to put it at a 50,000 seat venue, maybe an NFL venue, it kind of opens the door to either a big contingent of Panamanians, which I'm not arguing will swing the game, or just a half-empty stadium that, even though this game is critical,
right,
it's crucial, it wouldn't necessarily sell out a 70,000 seat facility,
right,
because Panama is not a
marquee team.
Yeah.
Okay, so as we mentioned in the scenarios, this is the more important match of the two remaining matches, I would say, because you're so close in points with Panama, and if you win, you leap over them into third place. But when the U.S. travels to Trinidad and Tobago, that'll be on Tuesday. We last played Trinidad in June, and in Colorado, where the U.S. won 2-0. I think the goal is get 4. I think that'll do the job.
Yeah.
I think we can win in Trinidad too. I don't see why not. They're the lowest of the group. They have nothing to play for. I mean, what do you expect when the U.S. goes to Trinidad?
When the United States goes to Trinidad, everything will hinge on what happens against Panama.
Yeah.
In terms of the lineup, how they play, the formation, the urgency. I'm expecting, we say this every time the U.S. plays. We say, oh, yeah, they can beat this team. They can beat that team. Well, I look at the standings, and they're in 4th. They've won 2 out of 8, so we get 1 out of 4 right. We've said they can beat Panama. They can beat Trinidad. Maybe we'll get 1 out of 2 of those.
Yeah.
I'm probably expecting a draw in Trinidad. This U.S. team, I know Trinidad they're down and out. They've lost 7 in the Hex, but when the U.S. comes to town, fans come out. Their players get really up for the game.
Yeah.
Even if there's nothing
to play for.
But I have a feeling that the United States will beat Panama, go in knowing they need just a win, knowing they need just a draw.
Yeah.
But I don't think there'll be any sort of letdown because they've lost that margin of error about a year ago where they can afford to take their foot off the gas in this qualifying.
Right. It's hard to talk about the Trinidad match in too much detail, not knowing what has happened in the Panama match yet, and that'll certainly have a gigantic effect on things. But before we move on to our final segment, what else is there anything left from World Cup qualifying with the U.S. that we want to hit before we sort of sign off until hopefully some World Cup coverage, or potentially or playoff coverage? But
well, I don't think I'm ready to reflect on it yet, but it hasn't been as fun and as enjoyable as we thought it would be, both in in terms of style of play, entertainment value. There've been some good storylines like the rise of Christian Pulisic, and that's about it. There's been more negative than positive,
certainly.
And going into a World Cup year, that's not something that it doesn't bode well for. The tournament itself.
I would say, I am not really surprised, and there's basically one question mark with Fabian Johnson on the USA roster, but I'm not really surprised by the roster, and I'm sure I won't be very surprised by the lineup. But I think once we get through these two matches, assuming we do qualify, I wouldn't be surprised, and I would almost welcome a lot of shakeup in the roster and be able to sort of reset and have, a lot of new faces at the World Cup. And I know that's kind of a lot to expect, but sometimes that's when the change has to happen. You can't really control when your players are getting old and when other players are coming in. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, it'll be an interesting few months for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But this isn't the final part of our show.
No.
Coming up, we have a special guest, John Robinson, who I will introduce to you later, but we wanted to talk about the USA U17 World Cup. It's going on in India. It starts on Friday, October 6th. USA will play the host nation, India, on the 6th at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. Then they'll play on October 9th, Monday, versus Ghana at 7:30 a.m. Eastern.
Ghana again.
Yeah, they're just always there. And then October 12th is a Thursday versus Colombia at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. All of these matches can be seen on Fox Sports 2. I always like watching youth national tournaments because it's just the best way to see up-and-coming U.S. players. And this is such a young age where there might even be a player in this age group that isn't on this roster that could end up being on the national team, just because it's hard to tell exactly how good players are at this time. But what are you most excited for with this tournament coming up?
There are a few U.S. players who I can touch on that are seriously talented.
Yeah.
And they're spoken of in the same breath as Landon Donovan or these guys. There's always hype around young U.S. soccer players.
Yeah.
But for these ones, I have a feeling from what I've seen that it's justified. So. We talked about how this current senior national team, they've been struggling. There's a bit of a lost generation, players who are between the ages of about 25 and 29 who should be carrying the U.S. senior national team, and they're not. And it's the same players that didn't qualify for the Olympics in 2012, missed out in 2016.
Yeah.
So this might sound harsh, but I kind of write them off as top-level players.
That's fair. No,
you look to the next generation and seeing who's coming through. There's good players on the under-20s, but these under-17s, it's like, who's going to support them? Because if and when the United States hosts the World Cup in 2026, these are going to be the players who are in the prime of their career, who will be looking to win the World Cup in 2020.
Slow down, Marcus.
Yeah.
Slow down.
They are the hopes of the future, and so there are three that I've identified. One is Timothy Weah. He plays for Paris Saint-Germain, who I anointed as the next Champions League winner.
Yeah.
George Weah is his father. George Weah, the 1995 FIFA World Player of the Year.
Wow.
Played for PSG, AC Milan. Marseille, some of the biggest clubs in the world, and could one day be the president of Liberia. He's in politics now. He's had a failed bid, but I'm not quite sure how Timothy Weah got into the U.S. system, but I have a feeling
he's in now.
I have a feeling we're going to be grateful for it.
Yeah.
He signed his first professional contract with PSG, so the potential is there, the pedigree is there, and really it's just about putting it together. And the second player is Josh Sargent. He's a striker who he scored 4 goals at the Under-20 World Cup just a few months ago. So he signed a contract with Werder Bremen. He's going to go over in February when he turns 18. He's only 17, but he was lighting up the Under-20 World Cup.
Yeah.
So he's a guy that could take the U.S. far if he's in form.
Yeah.
Third is Andrew Carlton. He's plays for Atlanta United, and he's supposed to be the diamond in their academy. They've got one of the best MLS setups from top to bottom, and he's one of the, he's one of the great hopes of the South. So really excited to watch those 3 play. U.S. is in a tough group. They have to beat India. If they don't, they could be
out in
gone.
a week.
There and back in the span of a week.
Well, great stuff. Good players to look out for. I think maybe some people have heard of Josh Sargent, but we've got to wrap it up. But definitely keep your eye on that. The group stage is only literally 1 week, 7 days, 3 matches in 7 days. So it's not a long tournament, not a big commitment for fans, but definitely fun and entertaining. Here's our interview with John Robinson. All right, and now we're joined by none other than the fabulous John Robinson. Very experienced soccer professional, 332 appearances for Charlton Athletic, 35 goals in 4 years in the Premier League, and also 30 caps for Wales, where he scored 3 international goals. John, how you doing?
Good, Mark. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to see you. Full disclosure, I first met John when he came to the United States to begin his illustrious coaching career, where he led the Canterbury Cougars to an undefeated season in his first year in the United States.
How many games did you play on that team?
Oh, I've started every game. But now he's a prominent youth soccer coach in Florida, helping youngsters achieve their dreams, and we're happy to have him on to talk a little bit about the U17 World Cup and some insight into youth development in the United States. So John, I'll just start you off with our first question. You played for the Welsh youth national team. What is the mindset of a national team player when you're at the youth level and you're going into a tournament and you're trying to get maybe like a first contract with a club?
Okay, so with a youth player for a professional side of things, the mindset is that you've got to be showing you're better than the players they've already got on a professional contract. So in England it was a little bit different, because at 16 you leave high school, and you're then in the big wild world. So you've got to then be you're up obviously going into a lot earlier than what you are over here in America, where you have obviously opportunities to go to college, and obviously high school only finishes at 18. So the mindset is still the same, as you've got to be better than the player they've already got on the professional contract at the moment. And that could be players that are 25, 26 years of age that could just be in your position. On the international setup, when you're going into a youth tournament, we played in the European Championship qualifiers, we played in the World Cup qualifiers, all of those which mirrors the full squad. Yeah. So what that happens is the mindset is it's like a 10-day period. You have 2 games, generally one on a Saturday, one on the Wednesday, which again mirrors the full squad. Yeah. So the mindset is just making sure that you're eating everything correctly, your preparation is correct, and again making sure just that that these games are so important that in a 10-day period you could be either out the qualifying procedure or in. It doesn't really matter, but the mindset is completely different in a youth tournament, in a tournament environment than what it is in a qualifier than what it is in like league games. Yeah. Because you've got 2 games in 10 days.
John, why is it that there are some players who really shine at these under-17 tournaments, and then they fail to really progress and make an impact at the professional level? I'm talking about players who maybe finish in the best 11 at the FIFA under-17, and everybody is really excited about them, and they don't make it. Why is that?
If you are okay, so I'll be a 2-way question, and so it's a good question regarding the America side of things. What you've got the under-17s, and they are possibly not even in the professional environment yet. They maybe with, I see there's a couple of them on the Portland Timberwolves Academy. There's some that aren't on the Timberwolves, like in a professional MLS academy. So you have to be in that environment to progress up. So I think it's harder for the United States under 17 players, whereas the European players, as I say, 16, you could be already signed your pro contract. You might have even made your debut for them, or you may be at a lower level club that have already made that. Again, might have already made their debut and played in the professional game, because again, we leave school earlier, and you have an earlier opportunity to be within the professional ranks or be around the professional players on a full-time basis. Here it's not. So I think once you go to the tournaments, you can impress. Obviously, they're quality players. They wouldn't be selected for any international team. They're obviously quality players. But that is only then for 3 or 4 games, depending on how long obviously it depends how far they advance in the tournament. So yes, you can do well against other players, depending on what kind of countries you're playing. But it's always going to be a bit harder for the players, the under 17s, in this country to make the professional grade and go on and make a career from it.
Okay, so going off of that, is there any sort of advantage you just talked about how it's sort of a disadvantage that United States players maybe are waiting a bit longer to start their professional careers. Is there any sort of advantage to maybe they're able to come into their own at a better time, a better age, and able to handle all the things that come with being a professional athlete by waiting until they have to be 18 or graduate high school to really dive into a full professional commitment? Do you see any way that it benefits, or do you just find it as sort of a hindrance when you're trying to help these younger American players find a club?
I think if you had the opportunity here, you've got athletes, fantastic athletes here. That's what I think America's completely different. They have a real good sports side of things, the professionalism of what it is. They now have an opportunity at a professional environment to make a career from them. So I think the more the MLS clubs can have these professional academies, the more at 16 they can say, right, the last 2 years of your high school, we're going to have the educational component within our system, within that. So you can still finish high school, but you're now training and playing every single day with a professional MLS academy, youth coach. Yeah. Now, the head coaches of the first team can see what you're like over a 2-year period to see whether they want to sign you in a professional contract. And then when they get to 18, which is when they finish high school as a senior, they can still get a degree because there's enough colleges around, if you're around the basis of an MLS academy, to partner up and say, right, these kids will go twice a day, like maybe 2 days a week to college, the schedule that we set. But again, they're training every day with the setup, and the head coach may turn around and have already offered them a pro contract because they're looking at them from 16 to 18. You're not in a high school environment. You're not even in a youth club environment within the United States. The more the MLS academies can call the shots, the better chance these players, these talented young players, or players that have potential to go on, will have a better chance and opportunity. That's what it is, because if you stay 2 years, again, then you're trying to now compete against other players, 17, 18, 19. You're competing against players that might have already played 20, maybe 100 odd games in the professional ranks. Yeah, that's a huge advantage. It's not now they should be thinking of. It should be thinking of, right, how can we? And then obviously that will help the main international team, the main lot. But the more they keep the kids at this age at 16, the disadvantage they're going to have. The more the MLS can effectively can help with US soccer and say, right, these are the credentials that we feel we could do. They've got fantastic colleges around. And working with kids and saying, right, the last 2 years you're going to be here at these professional academies. We're going to get you to high school. We're going to set that up for you, and almost have their own private schedule. Right. And then the same with colleges.
Yeah. Very interesting stuff. Marc, any reaction to that?
No, it makes perfect sense actually. Yeah. The step up from amateur sports to professional sports
Right.
is fraught with it's like a minefield with potential problems that can arise. So the more the teams and the more teams that are doing it, you mentioned MLS, but I would also include all the professional teams at all levels in this country. The
Right.
more they can develop players, the more quality players will exist in the system.
Right. Okay, well,
Again,
we also wanted to talk, the reason we're having you on, John, is because the USA U17s is starting up on Friday, October 6th. And, you know, you work in this age group a good amount. And when you see a tournament like this come along, I mean, do you get excited as a youth coach to see these youth players going at it?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we've got soccer and everything like that, and obviously the players here, I see talent, and it's great now that the under-17s players can actually view. So again, everyone should be supporting the U17s, the youth national team, because again, it shows other players what level you need to aspire to if you want to try and make a career of it. So it's great. I mean, yeah, of course, we all get excited for these kind of tournaments, and I really like the youth because that's where it is. That's the future for this sport, and I think the country and the whole thing should get behind whenever they come, whatever youth level comes about, especially like a tournament like this.
Well, the U.S. national team, youth national team in the U17s, their best ever finish in a U17 World Cup was 1999. They finished fourth.
Yep.
Since then, they haven't gotten past the round of 16 since 2005.
Wow.
So not too much success at the U17 level, but you know, maybe that'll change this year. The host country is India, and Marcus, have you looked at all into India as a soccer country and what the scene?
Yeah, it's like the final frontier for development. As you know, India's got 1 billion plus people there, and many of them love the sport. There's not a high-level professional infrastructure to develop players. It's similar challenges as we face in the United States, but India is a little bit further behind, probably where the U.S. was in the 1970s or 1980s, before professional clubs really started getting involved with youth development. But it's a fertile ground, and this is India's first time hosting a major FIFA tournament. So, you know, I think there's going to be a lot of excitement there and around the world because, you know, clubs are always looking for new ways to connect with fans and sell them jerseys and, you know, make them tune into games. So, you know, this is like FIFA's coming to India, and I'm interested to see what it's going to look like, what the fields are going to look like, what the crowds are going to sound like, what kind of crowds they'll draw, because youth tournaments, they can be hit or miss sometimes, where depending on how the host country's doing or the history of the sport there, it can be, you know, they can be packing stadiums or they can be played to empty stadiums. So I'll be really interested to see just what the conditions are like. I'm not expecting much from India as the host nation. I think the United States should, you mentioned that they haven't gone past the round of 16 since '05, but they've made it to the round of 16 just about every time. They might have missed out once. So it'll be really, you know, I'll be following the U.S. team and seeing how they're doing, and there are a few players who are really highly touted.
So John, before we let you go, I just wanted to ask you, and we talked about all the challenges facing American players and finding a club and finishing high school, but how involved are you in maybe helping your players that you're in contact with on a daily, weekly basis get in with a club and sign their first professional contract? And how involved maybe are you maybe helping them get recognized by, say, the national team?
Well, with our club, obviously down here, the Elite Soccer Academy, with the next professional, I always try and say for our club to have pathways, opportunities for players at certain levels. Now, so we actually have, we're the only club that I know, certainly in maybe Florida, certainly in Southwest Florida, that we actually have a college sports recruiting USA. They're the world's leading college placement company that actually work for our players to find them a college scholarship or college opportunities. We then also partner with a college over in England that is actually it's actually an American college called RISA, Richmond International Soccer Academic College, and we partner with them up there, and we've actually had one player, goalkeeper last year, that went and signed for them, and they play in the English League, and they play against like maybe Division 1, Division 2 teams, youth teams. So that's obviously and that's a 10-month period. It's not like college where you're at a 4-month period, August through to November, which is another topic. But so they go for 10 months.
Yeah.
And then they're playing up against other teams. Obviously, has scouts there. They have their own coaches there. So he's a starting goalkeeper for that. And if he doesn't after 4 years, all of his credits are coming back to America. So he's then going to be obviously being able to get maybe a higher level college and maybe go into the draft. So we give that partnership. We have that opportunity. We've got just over $2 million in the last 2 years of scholarships for players from our club.
All right.
Through working with Sports Recruiting USA. And we had 4 players that were on my PDL team, which is a semi-professional team. We had them go over and actually have a trial in England for 4 different clubs. One was Charlton, one was Bradford City, one was Brighton, and one was Wycombe Wanderers. Now, they didn't make the grade, but we were able to give them that opportunity to go over there. And just this Monday, we announced as our club that we partnered with a company called Soccerlution that actually have access to a lot of clubs within the London area, and they run their own academy over in England that's just by Wembley Stadium, that they have had players either have ex-pros or ex-players that have been released by youth academies that are looking at maybe another lower level professional club, or players that through their pro academy that they've had for 3 or 4 years will actually have an access, and they've just signed, Crystal Palace have just signed 2 of their players. And our teams played actually against them in the summer of this year when we took 4 of our teams over to England on an international tour. So we have connections in the MLS side of things. One of our players that played for our team, played for our club last year in 2016, and then also the year before that when he came as a U13 player, he just signed at the MLS Academy up in Dallas.
Very nice.
And he was part of us for about 1.5 years.
Yeah. Well,
so we have a lot of connections within our club to have pathways. The problem is that internationals, you've got to be into like further than ODP. I mean, it's got to be different. And again, there's so many leagues around the country. There's different leagues, and that's why, as I say, the best players and the national players will generally only come from MLS academies if they do it right.
Right.
But our club has pathways for MLS, as we proved, professional and college, abroad and here.
Right.
Wow.
Well, it's I mean, you threw out some big names there, so you're doing some good work there, Robbo. I want to thank you for joining us. You have any, wait, I didn't want to cut Marcus off. Do you have any final questions for Robbo?
Sure. Can Wales make it to the World Cup with Gareth Bale injured?
Oh, I don't know, Marcus. It's a big game this week, mate. It's a big game. It's like a playoff. It's like a knockout. Whoever wins it, I think, is obviously in the playoffs. But I mean, Wales have always been about the team. I mean, we've had world-class stars. The closest we ever got was when we hit the crossbar. No, when Paul Bowden missed the penalty. When Paul Bowden missed the penalty with 3 minutes to go against Romania. So I think this year, hopefully, it could be the time for the Welsh to get back on that scene. It's a good opportunity. With Bale out, it's going to make it much harder.
Certainly. Well, we'll be keeping an eye on it.
Yeah.
Thanks, bud.
All right, John. Thanks for joining us, and I'm sure we'll talk to you again sometime in the future. So,
thank you, John.
Always a pleasure, mate. Good luck.
All right.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Okay, thanks for joining us. Thanks again to John Robinson for coming on the show, and follow the links below to find out more about the work that he does with youth soccer. We'll be back next week to recap the USA's qualification, not qualification, playoff preview. We'll find out, and we'll have more on the world of soccer. So see you next week.